When the SEC proposes a rule or issues a concept release, the general public is invited to submit a letter to express their views on the proposal. Today on Zippy Point. I'm Brock Romanek and I'm a big fan of yous. So let's cover the nuts and bolts of sending in a comment letter to the SEC about a proposed rule. So first let's talk about the mechanics. You want to look at the proposing release. That's the document in which the SEC proposes its rule. So you're going to go to sec.gov, the SEC's website. You click on this regulation tab, and the second item down here is proposed rules. And that's how you get to the proposed rules. If you're looking for a concept release, you go all the way over here on the left, regulatory actions, and the fifth item down will get you to the concept releases. But once you get to this proposed rules page, you're going to look for the actual proposal that you're interested in. And so I'm going to look, I know the one I'm interested in is about amending the accredited investor definition that happened in late 2019. I'm going to go here, and here's the Securities Act number that was assigned to this proposing release. And that's the link. This is not a link here, the amending the accredited investor definition. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And this is the proposing release itself. There's a table of contents in this one. It's 153 pages. And the actual draft text for this rulemaking is at the back of this proposing release, all the way at the end. I'm not going to even bother going to it. And it's jargony. It's really difficult to understand. It's much more useful to actually read the body of the proposing release, because the SEC here explains why it's proposed the rule the way it has and asks a pretty large number of questions about each aspect of the rulemaking it's conducting, that it's sort of leading you down the path for where it wants some input, where your comment letter might want to go. The back third of the proposing release deals with a bunch of regulatory hoops that the SEC itself as a federal agency has to jump through. There's the Paperwork Reduction Act, the regulatory flexibility analysis it has to go through. So unless you're interested in the economic impact of the rule, you can probably blow that off. You don't need to read it and respond to it. If you are interested in the economic impact of the rulemaking, you do want to read that section and comment on it. So it depends what your interests are. So let's talk about how to submit the comments. So up here in the upper right-hand corner, the SEC has a page that talks about how to submit comment letters. And it notes there's three different ways you can do it. An online form that I'm going to show you in a second. You can submit it by email as an attachment. It's really important that the subject line of your email includes the file number for the rule. It starts with an S. If you do not include the file number for the rule in your email, it's pretty possible the SEC might mishandle your comment letter. And then you could submit it in paper, 3 copies to the secretary. I do not recommend doing that. That's a surefire way for the SEC to lose your comment letter. I would not blame them. All right, so if you want to use a form, you actually go here to the rulemaking again that you're interested in, and you look for this link about submit comments, and then here's a file number for this rulemaking. And this is a form where it's pretty easy to fill out, and then you attach your comment letters. You might have some supporting documentation. You can include up to 3 documents. Personally, if you have supporting documentation, if you can combine that with your comment letter itself into one file, I think that will be useful, since the SEC can then post that as one file when it posts your comment letter. And then once you post your comment letter, it takes the SEC between a few days to a week to actually get it up on their website. It depends on their workload, what's going on. Is there a holiday in there? And then here you see under each rulemaking, there's a sense about comments received are available for this proposal. And the SEC will post your comment letter in chronological order, the order in which it was received. And so your comment letters are public, in the public domain. It's important for you to know that. If you do not want your comment letter to be publicly available, do not submit a comment letter. The SEC is going to be loath to pull down your comment letter if you say, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be publicly available. That's on you. And then once it's posted, the SEC will post it in the format that you gave it to them. So the SEC will not screen your comment letter for validity. It could be gibberish. The only reason it would not post your comment letter is if it's a form letter. Instead, what it'll do is it'll put one copy of the form letter, and then update the running tally of how many copies of the form letter the SEC has received. So it'll say, we received 1,200 copies of this particular form letter, and it'll post 1 copy of the form letter. If it's a popular rulemaking, they might have a number of different versions of a form letter. It might say we've received 1,200 copies of this form letter, 600 copies of this other form letter, etc. There might be multiple. By chance, and it'll be listed up here at the top where the form letters are. For this particular rulemaking, there were no form letters. It does also indicate here if there's been meetings with the SEC staff or the commissioners about that particular rulemaking from people on the outside, and the SEC will post a memo about the meeting. The memo's pretty short. It'll just indicate the participants in it by name, both from the SEC side and from the outside side, what the date was, and a brief sense about what it was about, the topic, and the topic will be about this rulemaking. So these are usually one paragraph. So let me quickly run down 9 tips about how you can put your best foot forward when you're submitting a comment letter to the SEC. Number 1 is to make the letter usable. There's no specific format for how your letter should look. It could be chicken scratch, gibberish, like I just mentioned. It could be 500 pages long. But if you're truly trying to influence the SEC, you want to write it in a way that is persuasive, right? So you want to write clearly, format it in a way so things are easily understood, be specific about what you want. There's nothing wrong with organizational techniques like bullets, numbering, charts, and graphics. And don't make it 500 pages long. Quantity does not beat quality here. 2, you don't have to answer the proposal's questions, but it's not a bad idea. The SEC put those questions in its proposing release for a reason. You certainly don't have to answer them all or answer any of them. But what if what you want actually matches one or more of the questions in the proposing release? Please answer them. And when you do, be specific and indicate in your letter that you're answering this specific question that was posed in this section of the proposing release. Of course, you might not care about the SEC's questions. You might be really submitting a comment letter to impress your clients, potential clients, by taking a publicly known stand that aligns with their interests. But you don't really care about impacting the SEC's rulemaking, not really in your heart of hearts. You might really not be doing it to influence the SEC. Do you feel me? 3, be timely and even early if you can. When the SEC issues a proposal release, it will indicate what the deadline is for comments. For example, 45 days or 60 days from publication of the proposal in the Federal Register. And that typically takes about a week for the Federal Register to publish the proposing release. And then the clock starts going from there. Occasionally it's a 30-day window, but it's usually 45 or 60. It depends on the materiality of the proposal. If you really know what you want to say and you think it can be persuasive to other people that are going to comment, get your comment letter in early, because the SEC does post the comment letters on a rolling basis. It doesn't wait for the deadline to run to post all the comment letters at once. So this means that you might get your comment letter posted well before the comment letter deadline. And then others submitting comments can consider your arguments and decide whether to join your bandwagon and say the same kind of thing. And that's a good thing. Strength in numbers can help persuade the SEC this is something that people want. If for some reason you miss a comment letter deadline, that does happen all the time, send in your comment letter anyway, as it is the SEC's policy to consider all comments received up until the time it actually takes action, adopting the release or deciding not to adopt it. Although the SEC normally doesn't announce we're not going to adopt a rulemaking. It'll just let time lag, 20 years go by, and it's still in proposed form, but no final action was ever taken. That's what happens. And some groups are just notorious for missing the deadline fairly consistently. It's hard when it's in a group effort to get final consensus on what various positions should be. 4, submit your letter as a group. So if you're worried about backlash, about being on the record, having it out there publicly that you took a certain position on a proposal, for example, you know your largest shareholders think otherwise on that particular issue, in that case, you want to give input about a comment letter to a group that your company is a part of, an association, so that your own name won't be up there on the SEC's website for the world to see. On the other hand, if you don't care about who knows that you took a certain position, 5, you can submit your own letter, even if you're part of a group, and influence how that group's comment letter came out. So you can always do it on a one-off basis. If you're part of a group or fairly savvy about these kind of things, you might try your hand at submitting draft rule text. This allows the SEC to see the types of steps they would need to take in order to implement your idea. There's an art to writing a rule, and doing this kind of thing is truly voluntary. So if you don't include draft rule text, you're okay. The SEC won't penalize you. Not many people do it. Another point, number 7, don't argue about legislation. If the SEC is writing a rule because Congress, through some legislation, directed them to do so, If the SEC is writing a rule because Congress, through some legislation, directed them to do so, the SEC is required to act on that statutory directive to adopt a rule, so that if you argue about, you disagree with the legislation, that's just a waste of time. The SEC has no legal authority to change the statute, and you're going to piss them off. 8, put your comments in writing. So if you get lucky and meet with someone from the SEC staff or meet with a commissioner about rulemaking, that's great. The meeting might be in person, it might be on the phone, and even might be on a Zoom call. But your oral arguments there don't work unless you reduce those arguments to writing. That's because there's a formal process mandated by the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act. So it's got to be in writing. And I'm sure whoever you met with on the staff will tell you that. You have to put it in writing. But I'm telling you that too. You got to put your arguments in writing and submit them in a common letter. Then that's publicly available like all the other common letters. Note that if you do meet with an SEC official, there's going to be that notation posted on the SEC site that meeting was held. So that's going to be public knowledge that you had a meeting. And last point, number 9, yes, you can always submit more than one letter. But to be productive, don't repeat the stuff you've already said. The SEC has it. Just refer to the fact that you had this prior letter, give the date of it, and just list the new stuff in a supplemental comment letter. In theory, you could submit 3, 4, 5, as many comment letters as you want, but you want each one to be additive to the prior one. And if you submit too many of these, it starts to look a little bit strange. So limit yourself to one supplemental letter if you can, in my opinion. Anyways, let me know what you think.